Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Greg Olsen. Thanks so much for joining us today. I want to talk a little bit before we begin about a milestone that we've hit. Our Facebook Lives, thanks to you guys, have reached over 650,000 people since we started earlier on in the pandemic. So I encourage you all to pass these content on to whomever you know on social media and elsewhere, because there are so many services, supports, and benefits that New Yorkers are eligible for, but often people don't know what they are. And I think today's topic could be one of those. So I'm really excited for today. So by way of background, in 2016, New York enacted the nation's strongest and most comprehensive paid family leave policy so that working families would not have to choose between caring for their loved one and risking their economic security. To walk us through the intricacies of our paid family leave program, including who's eligible, how to sign up, we're joined today by leaders of the Workers' Compensation Board, which oversees workers' compensation, disability benefits, as well as New York State's paid family leave program. My guests today are Clarissa Rodriguez, who is chair of the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. Welcome, Clarissa. She oversaw the 2018 implementation of New York's landmark paid family leave program. And we're also joined by Courtney Vallee, who is a senior attorney at the Workers' Compensation Board. Welcome, Courtney, who assisted with the implementation and launch of the paid family leave program and continues to help manage the day-to-day operations of the program. So before we get into the questions, to really dive a little bit deeper into this really amazing and leadership program that New York State has for individuals that would fit the eligibility, I want to talk a little bit about how important economic security is to all of us, but particularly for individuals who are low income, who are older adults, who have to make very, very difficult choices on how to utilize their funds. There is an amazing state program called the Medicare Savings Program that can literally put $7,000 back into your Social Security checks. And if you're already enrolled in the Medicare Savings Program, or what we call MSP, remember, you have to renew your benefits every year or else you will lose them. But don't take my word, take a look at this.
Hi, my name is Heather Leddick with New York State Office for the Aging Health Insurance Information, Counseling, and Assistance Program. The Medicare Savings Program is a program designed to save Medicare beneficiaries up to $7,000 annually. For those of you currently receiving the benefit, don't forget you may need to renew. Notices can come from your local Department of Social Services, your Medicare Advantage Health Plan, or New York State of Health. Don't miss out. Return your renewal form today. You wouldn't want to lose out on this important benefit that helps save you money. If you have any questions in regards to the renewal or the Medicare Savings Program, you can reach out to HICAP at 1-800-701-0501. Thank you.
Now, live with Greg Olsen, Director of the New York State Office for the Aging.
Well, again, Clarissa, Courtney, thanks so much for joining me today. I think there's about 60 different agencies, authorities, and so on. One of those is the Workers' Compensation Board, which may not be familiar to some, maybe. Tell us a little bit about what the New York State Workers' Compensation Board is and what it is that you guys do.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first off, Greg, thank you so much for having us today. We're very excited to discuss paid family leave with your viewers, and in particular, family care, which is such an important benefit to workers in New York. Now, the Workers' Compensation Board is an administrative adjudication agency, and it has 13 board members appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate, and I, myself, chair that body. I also oversee the agency itself, which regulates several very important worker benefits programs, including workers' compensation for work-related injuries and illnesses. You know, injured workers through workers' comp can obtain medical benefits for life, lost wages, and death benefits where appropriate, as well as disability benefits for off-the-job injuries and illnesses. As well as New York State Paid Family Leave, right? The reason that we're here, for taking care of family in times of need. We also oversee several other benefits for volunteer firefighters, EMT, and certain civil defense workers. Now, when it comes to paid family leave in particular, in collaboration with the New York State Department of Financial Services, we approve self-insured employers. We issue paid family leave related regulations, conduct outreach and communication, enforcement and compliance through arbitration, including paid family leave discrimination, and other administrative functions. And the Department of Financial Services supervises and regulates the insurance carriers and keeps track of the program's usage.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot, and that's critically important for the workforce in New York State. So thank you all for what you do, and of course, the partnerships. So let's dive into paid family leave. Talk to us about when and why this was enacted in New York State.
Sure. So Greg, as you mentioned in your intro, for far too long, employees in New York State and across the US actually have had to struggle to balance their financial obligations with being there for family members, often having to make that impossible choice, right, between work and family due to financial constraints. Now, to address this, through the efforts of a large coalition of advocates and elected officials, as well as multiple state agencies, New York State Paid Family Leave was signed into law in April of 2016 and took effect in January of 2018. At the time, we were one of only 4 states with paid family leave, and ours was actually the strongest, the nation's strongest, leading the way for many other states to follow. New York Paid Family Leave is insurance fully paid for by employees through payroll contributions, payroll deductions. Specifically, it offers job-protected paid time off to employees who need to take time off from work to care for family.
That's great. And I'm not surprised that New York is a leader, not only in this, but in so many other things. Makes me proud to work where I do and to have, relationships with organizations like yours and the many others that we work with. So for what situations can a New Yorker take paid family leave?
Okay, I'll let Courtney take this one.
Thank you. So yes, so there are 3 reasons that you can take paid family leave. They're called qualifying events under the law. So the first one is bonding with a newly born, adopted, or foster child. The second is caring for a family member with a serious health condition. And then the third would be assisting in certain situations when a military spouse, domestic partner, child, or parent is deployed abroad on active duty.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about the rights and protections of the employee who opts to take paid family leave?
Yes. So paid family leave is job protected. And that is one of the things that we're most proud of with paid family leave is that we do have very strong protections that are in the statute, they're in the law. So one of those is job protection. So someone who takes paid family leave, they're guaranteed to be able to return to the same or comparable job once the leave period is over. So they can't be fired for taking paid family leave. You can't be discriminated against for taking paid family leave. It's job protected leave. Another protection that we have, which is also in the law, is continued health insurance. So employees are guaranteed to be able to continue their health insurance on the same terms as if they had continued to work. And like I kind of touched on before, along with the job protection, there's also protection from discrimination. So your employer cannot discriminate or retaliate against you in any way because you take or request paid family leave.
Oh, that's helpful. And you talked about the duration. So if somebody is eligible for paid family leave, do they have to take it all at once, or could it be as needed in terms of, several times over the course of a year for smaller amounts of time?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So you can take it all at once or intermittently. And actually before that, I'll tell you a little bit about what the benefits are. So the benefits were phased in over 4 years, meaning that the time off and the percentage of wage replacement, those are the main benefits, they became more generous with each passing year. So at present, employees can take up to 12 weeks off at 67% of their average weekly wage, up to a cap of 67% of the New York State's average weekly wage. So for 2024, that maximum weekly benefit, yes, as you see on the screen, is $1,151 with 16 cents. And that's approximately $777 that you can take home. But again, going back to your question about, yes, you can take it all at once or intermittently, but it has to be taken in full day increments. So for instance, if you're caring for a family member with a serious health condition that needs transportation, like every Wednesday, let's say, for medical treatment, you can take it that way, but you just have to take the full day.
So I'm going to combine two questions because both of you have said a couple times, a serious health condition. So we can define what that is, and then what type of family members qualify for this benefit.
All right,
Yeah,
Courtney,
sure.
do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So a serious health condition is defined as an illness, injury, impairment, and physical or mental health condition. So that's important. It doesn't just have to be a physical condition. It can be a mental condition. But that condition has to require either inpatient care or continuing treatment or supervision by a healthcare provider. So if you're under continuing treatment, it could qualify as a serious health condition. So some examples of that are very common that we see are something like you have a sibling undergoing cancer treatment who is in hospice, a spouse or domestic partner recovering from heart surgery, your daughter is in inpatient care for a mental health condition, something like that. Like those are examples of things that would qualify as a serious health condition that someone could take paid family leave to care for that family member when they're in need. And when we're talking about the employees, an eligible employee can take leave to care for a family member with a serious health condition. And the definition of family member is pretty broad under the law, and it includes your spouse, a domestic partner, which domestic partner is defined very broadly under our law. It doesn't need to be a registered domestic partner. It's much more broad than that. So it's not necessarily that you've registered a domestic partner. A child, which includes stepchild, a parent, step-parent, a parent-in-law, grandparent, grandchild, and this is new as of last year, siblings are also now included as family members. So that's an expansion that just took effect last year. And so, this is a pretty broad definition of family member. Not all the states, FMLA, like not all of these benefits include this many family members in the definition, including like grandparent and grandchild, and especially siblings. Like that's a new thing that we're proud of, the siblings including that and kind of expanding the definition of family member to account for more people and what they might need the leave for.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because it recognizes that there's a lot of different people that provide care for others. Now, you talked about the serious health condition. What qualifies as caring for a family member? Like what kind of activities do they have to perform?
Yeah, sure. I can keep going with that one. So caring for a family member is very broadly defined in the regulations for paid family leave. It includes physical care, emotional support, visitation, transportation, and assistance with daily living matters. So those are all considered providing care. So obviously when you're including visitation and transportation and things like that, it is very broadly defined, and it really tries to encapsulate like what you would actually need to be taking leave from work to care for someone who has a serious health condition. What are the things that you need to do? Obviously, assistance, transportation, but visitation is also very important for family members to be able to do. So providing care includes all of those things.
No, and I appreciate that because a lot of the work that we do are exactly those types of tasks. And we have a lot of, spouses that could still be working, or adult children or others who are working. And we'll talk a little bit about working caregivers a little bit later. Let's say I'm in a long distance caring relationship. So my mom lives in New York, but I live in Colorado. Would the caregiver outside be eligible, or do you need to live in New York?
Yeah, I'll take that one actually. So the answer to that question is no. They can actually live outside of New York or even out of the country, and you could still take this leave to care for them. So an employee providing care needs to be in close proximity and continuing proximity to family member receiving care, which means that they have to actually be with the family member for the majority of the paid family leave period requested, right? So you can't be caring for them, let's say remotely, right? You have to be in close proximity with them. And this aspect of New York State paid family leave was actually underscored by the need that came out of Hurricane Maria in 2017, which saw many New Yorkers with family members in need of care in Puerto Rico. So this was incredibly helpful to to anyone that had to care for a family member there. And as we remember, it was a pretty devastating hurricane.
Absolutely. So paid family leave is an insurance benefit. So we've kind of talked about the what, some of the definitions, but what employees are covered under this benefit?
Sure. I'll continue with that one as well. So most employees who work for private employers in New York State are covered. But an employee who works for a public employer, their employer may voluntarily opt in, but it's not a mandatory the way it is for private employers. So if a worker is a public employee represented by a union, they may be covered if paid family leave has been negotiated through collective bargaining via that union. So that's the
just a follow-up question to that. So, I see it out of my check. I know that I'm covered. For a private employee, they can look at their stub too. What would the best way to go? Because there are some nuances here in terms of who's eligible. Is calling your helpline to inquire about questions like that, or visiting the website, the best method to find out, hey, am I covered under my employer or not?
Yeah, absolutely. You can call the helpline, and we have folks that will answer the phone either in English or Spanish, or rather, you can obtain information in English or Spanish. But more specifically to your question, being covered doesn't necessarily automatically mean that you're eligible. So in order to be eligible, right, for paid family leave, employees have to meet requirements for the time worked at their employer. So for full-time employees, those who regularly work 20 or more hours per week, they become eligible after 26 consecutive weeks of employment with the same covered employer. For part-time employees, those who regularly work less than 20 hours per week, they become eligible after working 175 days with the same covered employer.
Okay. So again, there are some nuances here for those who are listening, and the best way to, dive into your particular situation or somebody that is to obviously reach out.
Yes.
If I believe that I'm eligible, how do I request paid family leave?
Sure, I can kind of go through the process of requesting paid family leave. So the first step would be you have to notify your employer. So if you know that you're going to be taking paid family leave, you have a qualifying event, you need to care for someone with a serious health condition or one of the other qualifying events, but I think that's kind of most relevant for the audience here. You have to notify your employer at least 30 days ahead of time if it's foreseeable, or if it's not foreseeable. So this is like a sudden, like a car accident or like an emergency surgery or something like that, where you really had no notice. You have to give as much notice as possible if the leave is not foreseeable. So it's 30 days if it's foreseeable, as much notice as possible if it's not. And then your second step is going to be, after you've notified your employer, is to complete the paid family leave forms. So for family care, that includes the PFL-1, which is the first step in any request for paid family leave. So that's going to be your general one, like, here's how long I've been employed, here's who my employer is, here's my personal information, all of that kind of stuff that you'd expect on an application for benefits. And then for family care, there's also two additional forms. So there's the PFL-3 form, which is a release of personal health information. So that is going to be kind of like a HIPAA type form that you're going to fill out, and your family member who you're caring for is going to fill out to provide it to their healthcare provider so that they can actually release the information. They can actually certify this serious health condition, because obviously your health information is protected. So this is a release of information so that your healthcare provider can certify, yes, this family member does have a serious health condition and this employee is going to take leave to care for them, and I'm certifying that that is needed. And so then the last step, once you've done that, and now that the healthcare information is released, is the PFL-4, and that's going to be where the family member in need of care, their healthcare provider is going to fill that out and certify the serious health condition, say, yes, this person has a serious health condition. Here's the ICD-10 code that goes with that health condition. Here's the amount that's needed. So sometimes, for example, if it's like dialysis or something like that, and you have to bring like your parents to dialysis once a week or something like that, they're going to say care is needed once a week for X amount of time. If it's something where they're inpatient in a hospital and it's more acute and it's like 2 weeks or something like that. So that's where the healthcare provider is going to certify, yes, they have a serious health condition. Here's how long and what type of, how long they need the leave and how often. So those are the steps, the required documents. And then once those are completed, you're going to send them to your employer's PFL insurance carrier. So it is the employee's responsibility. This is very important, that it is your responsibility as the employee to actually submit your claim. The employer has a section that they fill out on it, but it is not the employer's responsibility to send the documentation and the completed application to the carrier. It is your responsibility to do that, and you're going to send it to the carrier, and that's how you're going to get your benefits.
So let's just talk about timing, and I'm really just kind of looking for a ballpark. So there's, I notify my employer, hopefully it's 30 days in advance, but my mom has a stroke. She winds up in the hospital. I couldn't do 30 days, but regardless, once I fill out the 3 forms, talk to my employer, submit to the insurance carrier, how long does the process take to be approved? Because if my mom, for example, I filled the paperwork last week because she had a stroke, but she's coming home later this week, and I've already taken the time off, how long does that process take, traditionally, ballpark?
Yeah, so generally the carrier is going to have 18 days from your first day of leave or receipt of the completed request, whichever is later. So in your example, you've already completed the leave, but it was, a week or 2 ago. You have 30 days from the first day of leave to apply before you risk losing benefits. So it's a whole month that you have to actually send the completed application. And then once the carrier receives the completed application, with your required documentation, they're going to have 18 days from either your first day of leave or receipt of the completed request to pay or deny benefits. But the benefits are going to be paid retroactively, assuming that you applied on time and everything like that. They're going to be paid retroactively to your first day of leave. So even if you took a week of leave, you completed it, and then you submitted your paperwork, and as long as it's within that 30 days and you're approved, it's going to be paid for the whole time that you were out as well.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. That's very helpful. You said it's up to the responsibility of the employee to send the information to their insurance carrier for their employer. How do you find out who that insurance carrier is?
Yes. So there are several ways that you can find out. It should not be a mystery, but we have ways to help if your employer either didn't tell you, you're just not sure. So the first thing that you're going to want to check is your employer is probably going to have a poster displayed somewhere, like in a common area, break room, something like that. And we call it like the paid family leave poster. And it's going to have information on your rights under paid family leave and the information about where your PFL insurance carrier is located, where you send the application to. So that's kind of the first line of defense of finding out who the carrier is and where to send the leave. You can also ask your employer, and then kind of failing all of that, we have a public lookup tool on our website. So you can actually look up your employer and see who the insurance carrier is. It's going to give you like workers' comp as well as disability and paid family leave. So if you know their name, if you know their FIN, if you know their address, there's a few different ways that you can search, and then it'll display who your carrier is. And then if that's not working, you can't find it, you're not sure if you have the right FIN, anything like that, you're still not sure, you can always call the PFL helpline, and that's 844-337-6303. And that's the paid family leave helpline, and they can also help with a coverage search. So there's a lot of ways to find out. So please don't feel, like this is overwhelming. I don't know who the carrier is. If everything else fails, you can always call the helpline and we can assist with a coverage search.
Oh, that's great. And, you talked earlier about the strong protections that were put into place for this, the anti-discrimination, things of that nature. Who advocates on behalf of the employee if they've submitted things in time, and let's say the number of days in terms of response and approval exceeds the 18 or what have you? What should an employee do? Do they contact you? Do they contact their employer? What's your recommendation on that?
So if the employee has applied, they've done all of their completed paperwork, and the carrier just is not responding within those 18 days, again, it's 18 days either from the first day of leave or receipt of the completed request, whichever is later. So that's kind of an important thing to just keep in mind, is like, just because you've been on leave for 18 days, if you didn't apply right away, it's 18 days from then receipt of the completed request. But it does happen occasionally, not very often, but occasionally we'll hear the insurance carrier just isn't answering me. So all PFL claim-related disputes are subject to arbitration. So there's a neutral arbitrator that you can apply to, and they would resolve it. So they would either issue a decision saying, yes, this person is entitled to benefits, and here's how to do that. So it's NAM, National Arbitration and Mediation, is the arbitrator that does paid family leave disputes. So any claim-related dispute is going to be subject to arbitration, including untimely payment of benefits. So that is something that they see and they do deal with.
That's really great. I'm glad to hear that doesn't happen often. That's good news. There's probably some confusion because there's another program out there. So we've got the New York State Paid Family Leave program. There's also a federal program called Family Medical Leave Act. What is the difference between the two?
Yeah, I can take that one. And this is a really important question, and actually one that we get quite often. So the biggest difference, without going into too much detail, is that paid family leave is paid, whereas the federal Family Medical Leave Act is unpaid leave. There are also some differences in eligibility requirements, as well as who counts as a family member. And you can take Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, for your own serious health condition, whereas paid family leave, New York paid family leave, is used to care for others. Mm-hmm. So another key difference is also that employees use paid family leave in full days, whereas FMLA can be taken in hourly increments. So if you remember, I said earlier, you have to take them in full days, even if it's intermittent. And lastly, employees who are eligible for both Family Medical Leave Act and paid family leave generally can take the benefits at the same time, unless the employer indicates that they don't have to. So that's some of the major differences between the two.
And those are major differences. So I appreciate you going through that. Before we get to audience Q&A, we've obviously been talking with Clarissa and Courtney from the Workers' Compensation Board about the paid family leave program in New York State. But we're also talking about ways that paid family leave can help a caregiver. And I'm not a real fan of the word caregiver, because 55% of people that are providing some type of uncompensated care to somebody else, regardless of age, don't self-identify as a caregiver. They self-identify as spouses, daughters, sons, aunts, uncles, grandkids, friends, neighbors. But we've been doing a lot of work on this topic. We have 4.1 million people in New York State who are providing uncompensated care to somebody else at an economic value of $39 billion if it was paid for at the market rate. We also know through our work with the Department of Labor that we surveyed state agencies and private businesses in New York State to gauge what the impact is of caregiving, providing tasks that Courtney and Clarissa talked about earlier, those types of tasks, hands-on tasks, transportation, meal prep, assistance, things like that, on what the impact of the workforce is. And it's estimated very conservatively to cost businesses over $60 billion a year on lost productivity, people quitting the job, not taking promotions, which affects their economic security, and many other things. We developed with the Department of Labor a working caregiver guide that has paid family leave info and a bunch of other resources that are available to New Yorkers. One effective online preparedness tool that we try to get out there that's really designed for anybody over the age of 50 is what's called the TSAT, the Elder Preparedness Self-Assessment Tool. And this is really important because people will spend more time researching a microwave oven or, laundry than they will about what they need to do or think about as they get older. So here's a short video to talk a little bit about TSAT. And if you're over 50, Hi, my name is Greg Olsen, and I'm the director of the New York State Office for Aging. When you need to replace your refrigerator, maybe a washer or dryer, or how about a vehicle, do you do a little bit of research first before you make that big purchase? The answer is, of course you do. What we don't do is plan very well for getting older, understanding what to think about, what to plan for, what services might be available, who pays for them, and it can be very complex, but it is truly necessary. I want to introduce you to the TSAT, which is a fantastic planning tool. A perfect time to do the TSAT is when you gather over the holidays. Please share it with your friends, family, and neighbors, and sit down and get yourself prepared for the things that you need to think about as you grow up and grow older. Please take a look at the link below and take the TSAT tool over the holidays. You can actually take the TSAT tool other times rather than the holidays as well. So let's get into some of the questions and answers. I think we've got some questions. Here we go. Can multiple people take paid family leave to care for the same family member, like a brother and sister caring for their dad?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And Greg, I just want to comment on something you said about so many of us not necessarily identifying as caregivers, but having to care for a family, especially as we reach a certain age, we become part of the sandwich generation, right? Where we're taking care of our potentially our children and then our elderly parents, right? Or aging parents who may have medical needs. I myself am one of them. And this question is really poignant because I have siblings as well. And we often try to divvy up the task of caring for our mother who is alive. My father passed away some years ago. But anyway, to answer your question, employees who work for the same employer. So let's say it's you have spouses, right? Husband and wife work for the same employer. They can take paid family leave for the same family member at the same time, unless the employer specifically prohibits it. So it's really generous in that way. Now, employees who work for different employers, whether they be spouses or siblings, like you asked, they can take it at the same time or at different times, for the same family member, depending on their needs. And luckily, providing care is very broadly defined and includes things like visitation, transportation. These are things that multiple family members could be called to help with. So in my example, with my sibling, it could be that I can do the transportation, but I can't do the visitations as often, right? So myself and my sibling could sort of divvy up the care in that way.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have another question? There we go. How does paid family leave work with disability benefits and other paid time off, such as vacation time or sick time?
Sure, yeah, I can take that one. So generally speaking, when we're talking about different benefits, it's going to be different answers. So we'll take first thing is disability benefits. Paid family leave and disability benefits are both included in Article 9 of the Workers' Comp Law, and they cannot be taken at the same time. So they're for different reasons, right? Like Clarissa touched on with FMLA being for yourself, but paid family leave to care for someone else. It's kind of the same thing here that we're talking about with statutory disability under New York law and paid family leave. Disability is for your own off-the-job injury or illness, and paid family leave is to care for someone else, and you can't use them at the same time. When we're talking about paid time off, generally speaking, your employer cannot require you to use your accrued paid time off during paid family leave. If your employer is subject to FMLA, that's a federal law. So whether or not they can require you to do it in that instance, even if you're taking it at the same time as PFL, that's a question of federal law. But for our law, your employer cannot require you to take paid time off at the same time. A question we get a lot too about the interaction of paid time off is there a way that I can get full wages during paid family leave, right? So it's 67% of your state or your average weekly wage, capped at 67% of the statewide average weekly wage. So we do get a question a lot of like, that's not quite enough, like it helps, but it's not quite enough. Can I get full wages? And the answer is maybe. Your employer can allow you to top up. We call it topping up. So you would receive your 67% from the insurance carrier, and then you could top up using your accruals so that you receive full wages. Another thing that we say sometimes is an employer could pay full wages and then request reimbursement from the carrier. So there's kind of a lot of different ways that you and your employer can figure out, is there a way that I can get full wages? So that's really, your employer can't force you to use accruals, but you might be able to. And then the other thing to just keep in mind is that if you do use some form of paid time off during paid family leave, you just can't receive more than 100% of your wages during a period of PFL.
No, I think that's a great clarification, because the benefit is substantial, but 67% is not 100%. So, those, again, the nuances I think are really important, which is why, you guys as a resource is so important for some of these questions. Do we have another question? What if the employer doesn't complete the form as they are supposed to? So this goes back again to the protections and what you do if it's not always happening on the other side.
Yes. So for paid family leave on the PFL-1, if you're going to apply, you're going to see the PFL-1. It has a Part A, which is all the employee information that you're going to fill out. There's a Part B on that PFL-1. And that's going to say employer information, and it's questions like the employer's FEN, like they're also going to be asked about your average weekly wage. There's a few questions that the employer has to fill out. When you're filling out your PFL form, you give your application after you filled out Part A, you give it to your employer, and they have 3 business days to fill out Part B and return it to you. Important to make a copy before you give it to your employer, because if your employer fails to return the form to you within 3 business days, you do not have to wait for them. Like we talked about before, there is a 30-day application deadline from your first day of leave, so you do not have to wait for them. If they fail to return it to you within the 3 business days that they're allotted, you can just package up the rest of your documentation. You send it to your employer's PFL insurance carrier. You don't have to wait for them, and the carrier cannot consider your application incomplete just because the employer failed to fill that section out. So that's a very important thing, is that because it is your responsibility to apply, you don't have to wait for your employer. You have to give them the 3 business days, but then if they don't return it to you within that time frame, finish your application, get the other required documentation, and send it to the insurance carrier so that you don't risk losing any benefits.
Yeah, that's a really important protection. Thank you. Do we have another question? There's another one. What if I take paid family leave but don't get my same job back after my leave is finished?
Yes, so this is also an important protection that we have in the law. So under the law, you are entitled to return to the same or comparable job upon return from leave. So comparable job is one with like similar terms and conditions of employment, benefits, things like that. So either exactly your same job or a comparable one, your employer has to reinstate you to the same or comparable job. If they fail to do that, you can file a discrimination claim, and that's going to be heard before a workers' compensation law judge. So the first step in that process would be, there's a form, it's the PFL DC 119, and you're going to fill that out. It's a request for reinstatement. So that's also available on the Paid Family Leave website, and that you're going to fill that out. And it gives your employer 30 days to kind of remedy the situation. So maybe they didn't know, maybe they just misunderstood what you were saying, something like that. As long as, they have the 30 days to remedy the situation. If within that 30 days they remedy the situation, all's good. You don't have to continue on with the process at all. And that's it. Like that would end the process. If they don't reinstate you and you think that it's discrimination or retaliation because of paid family leave, then there's another step that you can do, and then that would trigger the actual case to be heard by a workers' compensation law judge. So there are protections and a process for you to go through if that happens.
Great, thank you. Here's another one. Doesn't everyone get paid family leave taxes taken from their paycheck?
I'll have Courtney answer that one as well.
Yeah, so this is a little bit confusing because you're getting something taken out of your paycheck, so you're going to think it's a tax. It's not a tax in like the traditional sense, like it's not the New York State Department of Taxation or Finance or anything. What it is all covered employers, so that's when we're talking about the private employers with one or more employees in New York State, are entitled under the law to take deductions from their employees to cover the cost of having those employees, the covered employees, on their paid family leave insurance policy. So paid family leave is fully funded by employees. So it's an insurance product that's funded by the employees. And the way that it's funded is through those PFL deductions. So covered employees are likely going to see deductions taken out of their paycheck. And those deductions can only be used by the covered employer to pay for the insurance policy premium. So, the same way that you would have, like, you pay your premium for health insurance, this is the same thing, as that it's paying for the insurance coverage that ends up giving you the benefits when you need the benefit.
Great, thanks. That's a good question. I like the answer. Well, we're gonna wrap this up. I cannot thank Courtney and Clarissa enough from the Workers' Compensation Board. There is the helpline number that you saw, as well as their website. Sometimes, after reviewing the website, there might be some nuances that we learned today that, require a human being on the other end, which they can help you with. But it's so important to have a benefit like this, where the Family Medical Leave Act is unpaid for self only. And we have a lot of people that are providing social services, long-term care, and health services to a loved one. And that's where this really fits in for somebody that has a serious health condition. So I want to thank you guys so much. The next time we are going to be joined by the Office of Cannabis Management to talk about the benefits of medical cannabis. And before we go, I have to thank my communications team, Roger and Darren, for helping to set this up, and Alex for all the production support. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Pass this along, and we'll see you next time.
New York State Paid Family Leave is insurance that provides job-protected paid time off from work to bond with a new child, care for a family member with a serious health condition, or assist a military spouse, domestic partner, child, or parent deployed abroad. Most employees who work for private employers in New York State are covered for PFL. Public employees may be covered if their employer opts in. For union employees, the benefit must be negotiated. Covered employees can take PFL for a qualifying event after meeting eligibility requirements for time worked. PFL provides up to 12 weeks of time off at 67% of pay, up to a cap. Leave can be taken all at once or in increments of full days. When taking PFL, you're guaranteed job protection, continued health coverage, and protection from discrimination. New York State Paid Family Leave means you don't have to sacrifice a paycheck to be there for family in times of need. Visit paidfamilyleave.ny.gov.
Live with Greg is a production of the New York State Office for the Aging Communications Bureau.